if you can bring your viewer into what you're seeing or feeling, you know how powerful is that? Absolutely. And it's not an easy thing to do.
The overarching theme of this first photo walk of 2024 might well be water, as you can hear. We're expecting rain in the next, well, if my app is correct, in the next 10 to 20 minutes. And then it gets really, really heavy in the next hour or so. I'm hoping for an or so here that we'll get this walk in. I'm going to get wet at some stage making today's show, that's for sure. Your letters will be a bit damper by the time I return. When I wrote down my short list of ideas and plans for 2024, I also noted down some single words that I suppose are intentions, or perhaps micro-personal mission statements to make them sound very grand, packaged up in a single word. And one of those words for 2024 is learn. I know we're always learning, so learn could be a bit of a lazy mission statement, in that you don't necessarily need to do anything more than just open your eyes of a morning. Alarm goes off, I'm learning I don't like the alarm. But you can be closed to learning, open and closed to it. And I'm not sure I've been as open to learning whilst just dealing with the day-to-day. For example, reading books is something I've not necessarily made time for. When there's accounts to be done, you can't go frivolously, I'll get that word, reading stuff when the accounts have got to be done, can you? No. So reading is something that I'm mentally making time for, just setting aside 10-15 minutes. I do spend a lot of time reading on the worldwide wonder, and I do get lost down rabbit hole expeditions, as I call them. So first slight tweak of the new year goes to the website, the photowalk.show website, which now has a learn section for every show, where I'll link to names and words and places you may be curious about following the show, or as you go along. And you might well say, well, isn't that what you do with the links anyway, Neil, in the show notes? But, well, yes. But in the past, I've made very particular links that have been very much highlighted as subjects, rather than take a sort of broader look at the more nuanced things that you mention in your letters and that gets mentioned during the conversations I have with guests. So learn is something I hope to share as a living, breathing part of the show this year. And on that note, the stuff of life or learn today from my guest Michelle Valberg, well, that could be a whole learning tree in itself. There are creatures that Michelle, the wildlife photographer, the famous wildlife photographer in Canada, there are creatures that fly and walk over the earth that I was not previously aware of. And I consider myself a follower of Attenborough. But Michelle has introduced me to more than a few creatures this week. She's an ambassador for Nikon. She spent 38 years behind the lens building and celebrating a fascination for photography and wildlife. She's a photographer in residence for Canadian Geographic. She mentors, she tours the farthest reaches to study and share what she finds. And even though we talked the best part of an hour, I think we really only scratched the surface. So we set up something else that's new for 2024, which is to give you an opportunity to ask questions of my guests for a repeat visit. So welcome along as we make our first photo walk of 24, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, enjoying the letters and the inspirational stories that you've sent in, and listening back to special studio conversations with guests from around the world. A show for those who find escapism and peace away from the noise of this world, putting miles under our feet and making a picture or two to remind us of where those footprints were left.
Today on the Photo Walk,
the real natural world. world, to explore it, to appreciate it, to respect it. When I became a photographer, it became my mission to bring it to the world. I never imagined ever saying that wedding photography would make me a better wildlife photographer. I know that probably really doesn't make any sense, but when you put yourself, anyone who has done a wedding knows the impact and the serious implications of you messing up, and the way that we've transitioned through photography, from film to digital and then digital to mirrorless. We're all becoming better photographers. Because I was told as a young kid and by many people that I'm too emotional. I'm an unemotional human. And it's wild to even think that somebody would even question that. When you're in the position that you're seeing something that nobody else is seeing or very few people are seeing, and you have the power with photography, with social, with your voice, with your imagery, it can make a huge difference.
That's Michelle Valberg, my special guest for this week's show, the first one of 2024. And before I give you a flavour of today's mailbag, thank you to our extra milers at mpb.com who sponsor this show and keep it here week on week. mpb.com is a website where you can safely buy and sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online. And you become part of the circular economy while you're doing so. If you're buying, you get peace of mind because they provide a 6-month guarantee. And if you're trading or selling, MPB send a courier to pick up your kit on a day you specify. And once it's arrived back at their warehouse, they've gone through all the checks to make sure you've graded it properly. You get paid really quickly into your account. mpb.com, look at the website. It's such an easy to use one, and it's helping photographers to buy quality used kit or sell gear that we no longer need, so we can free up some cash and give others a chance to make their stories. Go to mpb.com and there will be a link, as always, on today's show page. On the show today then, how introversion affects what you make pictures of, favourite places in the world to make those pictures, and how being devoured by forest has you feel. Making your own book or zine in 2024, how your feelings as a child possibly affect your photography as an adult. I have news of a second week in Scotland. Yes, there's a further week in Scotland this year of the retreat. And it being the first Friday of the month, it's assignment week. And I'm actually setting this one this month. There's a sort of theme of the challenges, which I think you'll like. It's not an overall theme like make landscape pictures or street pictures, but a sort of a method, kind of. Well, listen on and all will become clear. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. And fresh hopes for a new year of photography. Yeah, check. Let's walk. I was intending to make a walk along the river today, but honestly, the river, over the holiday break, we've had so much rain. And the river, where I usually go, is impassable in places. Well, the path is anyway. It's come up the river and it's gone across the path, and your ankle depth, at least in some parts of it. Barney would be like I don't know, just the top bit of a submarine that you see. What's that bit called? The top bit that you just see poking out a periscope. That's it. His head would be like a little periscope, I think. At points. Let me make a sketchbook picture. It's a fairly blur day in the sky. It's completely featureless. That's blur plus. But I do like this path. It's fairly it's up reasonably high, so I don't think we're going to be troubled by water being across this path. Put my letters down for a second and photograph along this path. My first sketchbook. Well, it's not my first of 2024, to be fair. I've been out there making some pictures, but the first one for the show of 2024. A tunnel of trees leading along this path. Just a slight bit of, light at the end when it's really lovely and sunny. It's a cracking shot because you just see this walking to all the light sort of effect. But here we go, f2.8, 1/2/5. I'm just really focusing on the very end of the path, ISO 200. There we go. A sketchbook to start the year. Right, I'd love to hear from you this year with pictures from your walks, with thoughts on the walks that you make, the places that you visit, the people you meet. Send your thoughts, your letters, your pictures to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. If you're sending pictures, 2,500 pixels wide, please. Don't put borders around the photographs or watermark them, but do make sure you send me links so that I can link properly to your work, whether that be on a website or Instagram, Flickr, Vero, whatever. And if you're sending, I have this actually on the page. If you go to the contact page, you'll find some questions there to help the conversation. Actually, that's what we're just about to talk about. But if you're sending sound, because toward the end of 23, you'd started making some soundscapes as well. I would love to hear those, but the files are usually very large. So if you can send them via some sort of WeTransfer service or Dropbox, that will be appreciated. So let's start this year with an opening letter from Andre Groth in Germany. Now, on the contact page, as I was saying a moment ago, I have a list of conversation starters. If you're writing in, hint, hint, once more, so that you feel you're not just starting with a blank piece of paper, as it were, that you have something that you can respond to. Oh, yes. Ah, yeah. Oh, I could tell him something about that. And it looks like Andre has taken in that page and taken a look at it to get things started. Hi, Neil. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for making this incredibly great podcast. And yes, I do go the extra mile. Andre, my thanks for being an extra miler. I'll talk more about that later. I answered my why on the only blog entry I have on my homepage on the website, andysphotos.eu. And if you don't mind, Andre, or Andy for short, I'll read some of the words from your blog, which will be linked to today, of course, on the show page. Why do I take and give pictures? Why do I have space on the internet? Why do I photograph mostly analog? So many whys, says Andy. Well, why do I photograph? Because it brings me pleasure and joy. And I hope that some of my pictures can bring some joy into other people's lives as well. That leads directly to my next why, to share and communicate. And why analog? Well, because it slows me down and makes me more thoughtful of my surroundings. So that's an excerpt from Andy's website, though from the letter, not only does making photographs give pleasure and joy, it also gives me serenity, says Andy. The whole process, starting with loading one of my cameras with film, then making the picture, and finally developing the film. I don't take many portraits because, honestly, I'm too introvert and shy to ask. I have a feeling, Andy, by the way, that this will be one of the facets of photography we'll be talking about in the 2 African specials, which will air in February, because photojournalist Jason Florio, who's one of our guides, will no doubt talk at, some length about this with our 4 explorers and I as we go making pictures in a country and a culture where there are, I suppose, different feelings, not necessarily rules, but different feelings and courtesies about making portraits of people on the street. When I take pictures, says Andy, I feel free and in the moment. It gives me space to not think about my everyday problems. We have 3 wonderful sons, says Andy. One is autistic and one is visually impaired, and I'm in therapy because of depression. But I can forget all of that when I have a camera in my hand. I don't think I've necessarily been influenced by any particular photographers. I just shoot what I like and what I enjoy. But I do have 2 very important spots. One is I hope I get this right, Rudberg Nude. I'm not doing that again. In northern Denmark land, because we have spent so many beautiful hours as a family there, and it's simply wonderful. The other is the abandoned old supermarket in my hometown. I liked it way more than the new one, and for me it's a symbol of times changing, for better or worse. Stillness, says Andy. Well, I'd certainly like to have more of that. I work approximately 60 to 70 hours a week. My word, Andy. That is hard work, but I love to walk through the fields and the woods where I live, and if the weather allows, I go barefoot because it grounds me. If I'm in the forest, it gives me peace, and I feel like I'm a part of a huge, benevolent, all-embracing organism. One of the books I'm reading this year, Andy, is all about that. I'm not necessarily a barefoot walker myself in the forest, but I do understand exactly what you mean. Maybe the book actually will talk about it, something more. I'll share it with you as I read it. Thank you for letting me share this with you, and keep up your fantastic work, from Andy. Andy, thank you for your kind comments. I really do appreciate them. Thank you for the pictures as well. It's a great way to start the year. And, another thank you, actually, for your honesty. I think that's the sort of thing that sets the scene and the mood for the year ahead on this podcast. It's really, really important to this show, to this community, that you feel you do have a safe place to share, not just your photography, but also for your stories, as you have there. And that lighthouse, the pictures that you've shared, that I will show on the show page today, that lighthouse that you photograph in Denmark, what an incredibly haunting place in a positive way, if that makes sense. And the abandoned supermarket on your website reminds me of a place very, very close to home that I would love to go and photograph. It's an old bowling alley, come cafe, come nightclub, and I hear on the grapevine that so much of it inside is intact. I used to, so this is going back, the nightclub part of it is years and years, it was called Venom, is years and years and years and years old. I think that is possibly the last local nightclub that I ever went in, and I hear that most of it is intact in there. It's like it's been preserved in some respects by time and the fact that nobody's been in there. So I'd be fascinated. Funnily enough, I found some photographs yesterday of a venue. I'm redesigning my website at the moment, my neiljames.com one, and I've decided that I'm extending it to include the commercial work I do as well as the social and wedding photography that I do. It's more of an all-round, it's in many respects stepping back 20 years itself, in that I used to have a more rounded website. I think it's probably quite obvious what I specialise in, but there's a lot more of it. And anyway, I was looking through some pictures and I found a building that I'd photographed. I'd been commissioned to photograph it as it was becoming a wedding venue. But it was, for many years, offices. And quite an old building, actually, an old Palladian mansion. Palladian? Anyway, mansion. And as I went around, it was like a scene from 28 Days Later, Andy. It really was. It was as if somebody had come into the office and said, right, something terrible's happening. Everybody down tools, go. I didn't find sandwiches there. If I had, there'd have been green, rotting, festering plates of whatever. But everything else was as if, honestly, there were pens. I found pens that had caps off that were just on notepads. It was bizarre. And that's sort of what I'm hoping to find in this. I don't know. I'll probably write to the estate agent or whoever's looking after the place now, and they'll say, no thanks, we'll keep it locked up. You don't need to go in there. But I'd be absolutely fascinated to go inside that place. I really would. I have that fascination, Andy, that you clearly have for nostalgia and things of the past, for better or worse, as you say. Anyway, thank you for your letter. Cracking one to start the year. And if you'd like to write in, the email address is stories@photowalk.show. I think we're being very lucky. I was expecting the rain by now. Shh, Neil, shh. They may have forgotten it was supposed to rain in your area. You're right. Maybe they have. There's a bird that's playing with me at the moment. I keep walking towards it, holding my mic in the air to see if I can get some nice sounds from him, her. And then they move almost straight away. I'll go, shh. I'll step quietly. Here we go. I think she's staying put. There we go. Oh, beautiful. I'm going to this year, as part of my learn thing. Oh, now you're following me. Fantastic. I'd like to really get better at bird calls. I really would like to learn that so I can say, oh, there's a song thrush or whatever. I know I'm pretty good at robins, but then peep, 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 peep. It's not a very difficult one. But other birds, not so good at. My friend Andrew Hardacre, I reference him whenever I talk about birds, it seems. He would know. So would Dwayne, of course, from Australia. He might not know the English variety or the British variety, but yeah, it's a skill. I like that. Andrew Hardacre in Hong Kong, he's a birder. He knows that sort of stuff. I do think it's a skill. I'm out in America later this year, in July, August, and I'm hoping to arrange an informal meetup for photo walkers. Now, America being so vast, I'm not so sure that our amazing spread of listenership across your fine country will all wish to make the journey for a photo walk and a beer or coffee or whatever your poison is, and shared stories in what's likely to be, well, Fort Lauderdale or Orlando, possibly Miami. It may, of course, just be me in an empty diner bar, just like in the movies, waiting for a friend to turn up who never arrives. Cue sad music and a walk into the night scene. But Chaz Spiros, who entered a picture for December's assignment, you'll see it on the assignment page for December, a new one to come shortly for this month. I think, Chaz, you may just come to my rescue. Re-America, says Chaz, who's written in. Let me know when you're out, Neil. I'll be more than delighted to help with any organising whatsoever. Chaz, you don't know what you've just gotten yourself into. But if I get a few mails suggesting which of those three places, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, Miami, that the one that's most desirable or easiest to get to, then we could start to hatch a cunning plan, as Baldrick says. Although I think I may have to teach you in America land who Baldrick actually is. Separately, says Chaz, I know the British aren't always keen on compliments and superlatives, but your podcast has had a positive impact on my life. See, already, Chaz, I feel I need to deliver this letter with an apologetic overtone from me to say, look, there's a reason I'm sharing this. It's not a humble brag or even outwardly open look at me influencer kind of brag. It's just that I'm delighted that you've been moved to make something because you heard me mention it. See? I had to do a disclaimer. Chaz says, the podcast has had a positive impact on my life, and I'm working on a body of work, a small book called Scenes from My Commute. Now, I don't always get a chance to walk, but I'm in a car driving to and from work, usually, my own pinstripe express, I suppose, into the world of finance. 4 days a week, listening to the podcast daily, and I've had my camera on the front seat each day of 23, now moving into 24. I'm going to put together a small book of my captures from 2023, and I'd love to send a copy to you because it's been truly inspiring. The podcast, that is. Would I like a copy? You're kidding me? Chaz, would I like a copy? Does a Leica X3 burn a hole in your pocket? You're dang right I would like one, he says, practicing his bar stool lingo for a diner somewhere in America later on this year. So yes, please is the answer to that. I would like one. Right, I shall come back to books, actually, and assignments shortly. I want to introduce you to my guest this week, who is, and actually for the next 2 weeks, both my guests are from Canada. But firstly, the world of wildlife. Next week, thanks to an introduction, actually, from my wildlife guest this week, You'll hear that within the conversation. We're going to go caving underwater with one of the world's finest underwater photographers. I have a lot of questions about that. It was Joshua Hale who introduced me to Michelle's work very recently, actually. So Joshua, thank you so much for that. And I'm all the richer for the introduction. If learn is one of the things I want to do more of in 2024, this conversation will be within my having learned lots list, as you will find out. So let's get immersed in the magic that is wildlife and wildlife photography. Here's Michelle Valberg, part one of 2 parts of our conversation today. Michelle Valberg, a renowned wildlife photographer, has spent over 3 decades making photographic journeys to the farthest reaches of the globe, where she fearlessly seeks out thrilling adventures and remarkable photographic opportunities. Throughout her work, Michelle's deep-rooted love for Canada and the Arctic shines through in her breathtaking imagery. Michelle, this is what I not so loosely describe as living the dream.
Living the dream. I know when you're saying that, I'm listening. Well, as you're introducing me, I'm listening going, wow, that's me.
Yeah, it's you. It's you.
That's me.
As we're talking, you'll be on another expedition. I thought you were going to the Arctic, but you're not. You're going the other side, aren't you? You're going to the Antarctic. And right now, about now when this program is going out, you will be in a part of the world where you were sort of fearing what it could be. Not the destination, but the bit between.
The bit between. Everybody knows about the Drake Passage if they've gone to Antarctic. So actually, I won't be on the Drake. Now, I told you I would be on the Drake, but we're actually going to be crossing over to Falklands, which can also be a little dodgy. So wish me luck on that one.
I do wish you luck. What did you say you wanted, either the pond or the... What was it going to... the lake?
The Drake Lake or the Drake Shake. Okay, I'd like the Drake Lake.
The lake. Yeah. I know you're not going to be on the Drake, but we have a lake regardless, wherever you...
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Wherever you are. Coming back to the Arctic, though, it's got the most incredible resilient animals to observe and photograph. You've got the walrus, the narwhal, the ice grizzlies, the blue... I've never seen a blue Arctic fox. What have I been doing with my life that I've never seen one?
You'll have to come to the Arctic.
Well, there we go. It's a very harsh environment for them. I would have thought, and the same in the Antarctic, it's a harsh environment as well for you. What do you do to look after yourself and the kit that you're carrying?
Yeah, and that's a really important comment, because if we're not taking care of ourselves and making sure that we're protected, because you can be in some pretty cold temperatures. Yeah. You got to be well protected yourself for you to be a better photographer out there, right? There's no doubt. Actually, in the Antarctic now, we go in the summertime, so it actually is warmer than it will be here in Canada in the next month or so. But yeah, in the harsh on those harsh conditions, and you've got to be well protected yourself, and then you have to protect your gear as well. And it can work in both climates. As far as I just was in French Polynesia and Seychelles last year, and Indonesia, when it's on the opposite end of the scale and you've got 42 Celsius and you've got this massive humidity that you're not used to and the sun is blaring down on you. So yeah, as wildlife photographers, you're not only battling, the opportunity to maybe see a dangerous animal or be in the midst of, a dodgy situation perhaps, but you've got to be well protected yourself.
I'm intrigued. What dodgy situations? You said it, I'm intrigued.
I've almost been charged by a polar bear. I was only feet away, and he had every interest in pursuing us. Unfortunately, I had a really good guide that was in between me and the bear, and he was speaking in Inuktitut. He's an Inuk guide, and he's grown up with polar bears, and he stood there fearless right in front of me and talked to the bear and told the bear not to charge us, and we didn't want to cause it harm, and we didn't want it to cause us harm. And yeah, it was pretty wild. Now
that's a language you need to learn. We'll come back to the polar bears very shortly. So come on then, where does this interest in wildlife, where does it stem?
My parents were avid birders and they loved Canada and they loved exploring and they loved camping. They wanted us to see the world, but more importantly, they wanted to see my sisters and I, our country. And we went to every province from east to west. And it was, you can imagine driving around with three little girls in the car. I can imagine that wasn't tremendously fun at the best of times. But yeah, they were the ones that really got me interested in. Well, my dad got me interested in photography, but the real natural world and to explore it, to appreciate it, to respect it. And then when I became a photographer, it became my mission to, bring it to the world, what I was seeing. But as a wildlife photographer, it's not easy to come out of university and just say, I'm going to be a wildlife photographer. I'm going to work for National Geographic, or I'm going to, it just doesn't happen like that, unfortunately. If it happens to you, then you're in the very, small scale of the big picture. But it became a real passion. So when I did photography, and I have done photography for 38 years or so, if not 39 now, you kind of have to do everything in order to make a living at photography. So it was always on the sidelines, so whenever I could, I would go out and photograph whatever critters I could. I wasn't traveling a lot because I was working. I had my own business. When it came time that I had a little bit more time and I could travel, then I was always going to destinations that would allow me an opportunity to see animals in the wild and to photograph them.
Well, I was surprised to hear that you started in wedding photography. It wasn't what I was expecting to hear, but you did say, and I read it was an article I read, so I'm going to have to remember this, but I'm pretty sure you said that without wedding photography, you wouldn't have had some of the tools that you now use for your wildlife photography.
Absolutely. For any kind of photography, when you have to think really quickly, you have to be in demand, you have to be in control, you have to think fast, you have to create opportunities that are presented to you. You don't necessarily, in a lot of the wedding photography, you can pose people, but at the same time, you have to think on your feet. You have to think really quickly, and you have to be creative. You have to use your technical skills. So everything comes together very, very quickly. But you're also creating something for people that is a lifetime of memory. No pressure there. No. So all of those elements come together, and I never imagined ever saying that wedding photography would make me a better wildlife photographer. I know that probably really doesn't make any sense, but when you put yourself, anyone who has done a wedding knows the impact and the serious implications of you messing up or not producing and what that can mean. And it's a lot of pressure.
Well, would you rather be facing then an angry polar bear or an angry bride and groom?
Polar bear.
I thought you might say that. So this change then, when the change came, how did it happen? How did you make that transition, moving from one genre or many genres into what you really wanted to do?
I had to merge them. I had to continue doing what I was doing. I haven't done weddings in about 20 years or so, but I have taken pictures of people for my entire career. I love portraiture. And I was known as a portrait photographer. And then all of a sudden I'm in wildlife. And then when I was in wildlife and I was photographing with wildlife photography, they're looking at me going, well, you're a portrait photographer. And then when I'm with portrait photographers or commercial photographers, they're like, well, you're a wildlife photographer. So it was a transition for sure. And now a lot of people don't even know that I've done portraits, which is really kind of fascinating to me because I built my career on taking pictures of people. So yeah, it was a real merge. I had to still create in the studio. I only gave that up about a year ago. But I'll tell you, to go from, being in the wild and photographing, say, a polar bear or swimming with narwhal or doing something crazy and out of control, like completely out of control, to being in the studio where, I've got makeup, I've got light, I can tell the client how to pose. I'm in full control, so it's just like a mind warp when I went from one to the other or backwards. It was just crazy. That
feeling of being out of control, I would imagine that's your main driver now, because you really don't know what's going. I mean, I guess you can read the game, as the expression goes. But you don't really know what's going to happen, do you?
You never know. The animals are completely unpredictable. And the only thing predictable is their unpredictability.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're completely out of control, but I think it brings you to the present. That's whatever is in front of you is what is happening in that moment. And whatever happens in the future, whatever happens in the past, mostly in the past, I guess, just disappears. You're in that moment, and it's exhilarating and amazing because you just have no idea. You want it. I've been in situations going, perfect light, perfect scenario, perfect everything, but no animals, And then you have the perfect scenario that works. And then sometimes, you don't have the perfect light, but you have an amazing encounter. So you have to drive yourself as a photographer to try to figure out how to create perfectly within those situations or those boundaries or whatever's happening. It's a challenge every single time that you're out there, whether you're photographing in your own backyard or you're in these crazy places.
Did your sisters follow you into this business or industry in any way, shape, or form?
No, yes. So they both love photography, and I think they've embraced it in their later stages of in their older ages. Not that they're old. I'm not telling you my sisters are old.
We'll try and edit that. We'll try and edit that bit out, shall we?
How do you edit that out?
I would say, I usually say in this particular moment, we'll probably have to leave it in so it makes sense. I usually say as we get more mature. That's the one I've started using.
And I should have been a little bit more, sensitive since I'm talking about my sisters. They are older, by the way.
They're more mature, Michelle.
My more mature. No, I like to always say they're older because they'll always be older, right? I'm the baby.
Which is a good thing.
Oh my goodness, we totally digressed on that one.
But they followed you into a life-loving photography, but not necessarily standing in front of polar bears. No. Well, they've come on adventures with me. They've been to the grizzly bears in BC with me, and I've traveled with both of them. Kim, I've gone to both the Arctic and Antarctic with. So we've had a couple of amazing adventures together. We'll come to the grizzly bears as well in a while. In those earlier days, I think it's fair to say that the photographic industry, in certain genres anyway, was pretty male-dominated. I wonder what your take on the business is now.
It's more and more women, definitely. I have seen a change in my clients who come on group tours with me, their interest. It's amazing to see so many women. And a lot of the couples that come on my tours with me are actually the male, the husbands that don't necessarily take a photo. They just follow along, and the wife gladly does all the photography. Fabulous. Which is super cool. Yeah, I didn't see that a long time ago or a while ago. Yeah, it's been a transition, and being a young female coming into the industry was a huge challenge constantly. I do see a change, but there's still there's work to be done. Still some. Yeah.
You took part in an amazing book where I think you must have done all the photography of the incredible women, the movers and shakers of this world.
Yeah. So I have been, inspired by so many amazing women in my life, from business women to entertainers, my friends, survivors. So many women have inspired me, and I had done a book on HIV and AIDS, and so this is where my portraits. And I did that, and my dad was the one who was just kind of chirping my ears after I had done that one. I think you should do another book, and I thought, because I had given my heart and soul and my blood and my money to everything to my first book, I was like, "Are you out of your mind? I'm not going to do another book." And then he's like, "I think you should," and I said, "Well, if I'm doing another book, I want to highlight Canadian women and the people that you don't necessarily know about, because there were survivors, there were mothers, there were people who you wouldn't necessarily know, that they're not in the fame and fortune of the Canadian people that you might hear of." And I think that was wonderful to see this combination of women in different aspects of their life telling their stories. So
I'd like to come back to your books in a while. So many things to come back to. We spend the whole...
How long do we have?
Well, you've got to be off on a boat trip soon, so it can't be too long. When did the work with the Canadian Geographic start then? Because that's been a really important part of your work, isn't it?
It has. And I remember when I was in my studio, I had a client come in and she said she worked for Canadian Geographic, and it was just, what? You do? And I didn't even know that their head office actually is in my hometown of Ottawa. And you know what? People all the time say, how do you get noticed? How do you put yourself out there? How do you get your work seen? And I started to submit to their photo club. And as I started submitting, that was where I realized that I had, I guess, I had their interest, put it that way. So then my relationship started building there, and it's been an amazing ride. And I adore those folks over there and their mission, and to make Canada better known to the world and to highlight all these amazing people. They have explorers in residence and photographers in residence, and and even Jill Heinert, the underwater diver expert, and there's so many people involved. So it's been a wonderful opportunity. So anyone out there who wants to get their work seen, and don't leave it on your computer, and submit to photo clubs or contests, that sort of thing. I always say, get yourself out there, and it's a really good gauge on where you're at with your photography too.
That's a really important bit of advice, because I think it's all too easy sometimes. Well, I won't let that go just in case it gets taken by somebody and abused or used in a way that I wouldn't want. So we're very protective, aren't we, as photographers? Which is a good thing, because of course we don't want our images we don't want people to manipulate our generosity. But at the same time, a lot of stuff stays on a drive, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's stuck on your computer drive, not being seen by anybody.
Yeah.
I remember those days, right, when we went to digital, and then all of a sudden we lost our possession of our film, and then all of a sudden somebody could do something or post it, or somebody could use it as their wallpaper, or it would end up being somewhere that it was manipulated or treated differently, and you lost control. Basically, that's what it was, right? When we had our negatives, we had control over them. Yeah. And then when we started losing it, now I've gotten well over that. I'll post on Instagram. I don't really put anything on Facebook in my best of, because that can be much easier. It's much easier, I guess, to kind of right click save and put that onto your drive, or somebody else to take it. But every time somebody takes it, maybe they're messaging your work to somebody else, or, oh, look I saw this. I mean, it's amazing, the opportunity and the reach that we have now with social media. And, if you want to become a better photographer, it's a great place to learn. And you can see people's reaction, what they like, but also how we learn from other people's work. Absolutely. And how inspiring it is to thumb through Instagram and see the amazingness that's being put out there. Maybe locations that we wouldn't have necessarily known about before, or a way that somebody approaches the scene, or the way that they process their images, all that kind of stuff. We're learning all the time, just because we're so inundated with so much imagery.
Well, without sounding too mature, I tried to introduce our youngest the other day to the concept of having an encyclopedia, and I said, look at what's on what you have at your fingertips. I remember the Encyclopedia Britannica man coming around with these boxes that got delivered in a truck. And that was it. That was our internet. And this opportunity, this availability of knowledge and learning and following is incredible, isn't it?
Staggering, actually. It's hard to believe. And the way that we've transitioned through photography, from film to digital, and then digital to mirrorless, and we're all becoming better photographers, because the equipment that we're being, shown or offered, or, if you're fortunate enough to be able to put it into your hands, the opportunities are getting better and better and better. But I say that, but at the same time, we still have to practice.
Absolutely. Well, you're a Nikon. I know there's many different pronunciations of it, ambassador, which is fabulous, and they champion your work, and you champion them. How has the equipment made a difference in your life? I mean, I know you mentioned the move from film to digital to mirrorless.
Yeah, when the D1X came out, that's when I leaped over. And now I'm aging myself, making myself very mature. And I remember, and I was shooting all Hasselblad, and I picked up that D1X, and I never went back. No. I literally, those Hasselblads stayed in their camera cases, and they're still in my basement. And I just knew, obviously, that this was going to be the future. And I had people who didn't even want to hire me for a wedding because I was shooting digital. Can you imagine? I wish I got their phone numbers.
Yeah.
So remember when you didn't want me to do your wedding? It was different. It was just so different.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then as I was part of the ZZ7 launch in New York, and as soon as I picked up that camera as well, it was just like, okay, this is going to be the future. Let's embrace it. And I thought then I was a huge leap for me because mostly with my DSLR, I was manually focusing. I just wanted that my own control. And then when I launched this camera, I went, okay, I got to embrace autofocus. Like I gotta let go of this little control thing I've got going on. And it just being able to see your images. And I've been with animals way more. I have been able to spend way more time with the animals because there's just not the sound of the click, click, click. So the silence, all those aspects of the mirrorless have definitely improved my work, and I know it's improved so many others too.
Well, I was going to ask what the most important thing was in terms of advance, and I did think, I wonder whether it will be the silent shutter, because when I talk to bird photographers, they'll say, you can't believe the difference an absolute working in silence has made to my career.
Exactly. Absolutely. I spend a lot of time on my kayak, and I'm out there first thing in the morning, so I'm not making any sound. I'll remember like the click, 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 birds, any kind of animal that I was photographing. It was just, you're changing their behavior. And that's the wonderful thing. It's like you're incognito and you're an observer, and being able to observe the animals without changing their behavior because they sound because of the sound of the click it's remarkable.
In terms of style, I look at your work and one word, well, many words spring to mind, but one thing that really springs to mind is connection. And it is never clearer than in your polar bear collection of photographs, this connection that you have with this beautiful yet feared bear. You look, and this is going to sound overly poetic, but I genuinely mean it. You do look into their soul with your pictures. They're definitely eyeballing you. Don't know whether they're thinking that's my next tea.
Oh, I never thought it. Well, yes, I do think of them when they're looking at me and saying, you look pretty healthy and yummy.
But what are you thinking when you photograph an animal as majestic as a polar bear? What goes through your mind?
How lucky and fortunate. That's the first thing. If I have an encounter with an animal and I look eye to eye with them, I think I'm the luckiest person in the world. I mean, that is such a gift. After that, I guess somebody asked me if I'm too emotional, or if I think I'm too emotional, or do you think, I guess it was you're obviously emotional when you take photos. Do you think that helps you in your work? And that was a really important question for me, because I was told as a young kid and by many people that I'm too emotional. I'm an unemotional human. And it's wild to even think that somebody would even question that from another person. Like, how could you be so emotional, or why you're so emotional, or don't be so emotional? That's what I would get. I just heard it a year ago. Don't be so emotional. They're like, what? But yeah, I think that's what makes me appreciate feeling honored and blessed to have any kind of encounter with anyone. I was watching my squirrel outside just before talking to you, and trying to get on the bird feeder. And he's looking at me going, okay, this isn't working. It doesn't matter what animal that I'm looking at or that I'm photographing. I just think it's a real gift. And I thrive for that connection. Yeah. And I think if you can connect, or if you can bring your viewer into what you're seeing or feeling, how powerful is that? Absolutely. And it's not an easy thing to do.
Was it a red or a grey squirrel?
It was a black one.
A black one?
Black one. Have you ever seen a black squirrel?
Oh, God, now you've introduced me to another animal I've never seen.
I'm going to send you my video. Yeah. I videotaped him because he goes up. It's one of those, little hooks at the top.
Yeah.
And he goes up, and we don't even have any snow here right now, which is totally bizarre. And it was raining, so it was a little bit wet. So it's amazing to see how he gets up. I can't believe I'm talking to you about a black squirrel going to my bird feeder. But anyway. it was really quite funny. And the way that he looked at me, it was hysterical. It's like, okay, can you help me out here? This isn't really working for me.
Well, I did see in one of your portfolios a beautiful picture of the red squirrels. A squirrel? I think they're squirrels, aren't they? They're plural.
Yeah, they're squirrels. Yeah.
Yeah. And which you're so lucky. We I think it was a Victorian period where we decided we wanted grey squirrels to make our country houses look a bit prettier, or some sort of weird thing that we imported grey squirrels. And they just went, well, they killed off the reds. There are only reds left now, I think it's the west of Scotland. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. Maybe it's across the whole of Scotland, but and on the Isle of Wight, the small island right at the foot of England. The rest of it, I thought I saw a red squirrel here only a couple of months ago, and I just got met with this, obviously you were drinking look. But they are such
red squirrels, we have black squirrels and grey squirrels.
I know. And for some reason your reds have managed to survive the greys. I don't know why that is. Sorry, we're talking about squirrels and I wanted to talk about polar bear for a minute.
We were talking about squirrels.
I know, completely sidetracked there. I know you mentioned that you got really a little bit too close actually when you had your guide with you. How close do you allow yourself to get to animals? There's a huge trust in the animal, yes, and a huge trust, I would imagine, in the guide.
Oh, yeah. And there's times that you have no choice when the animal approaches you. If you're sitting there and a bear comes out of the woods and he's coming to the lake or to the river to feed on salmon, they have their own mission. So, and if they're used to seeing, I was going to say, if they're used to seeing salmon, if they're used to seeing people, they're just going to go do their business. But you have to remain calm, quiet, cool. You can't be lifting your cameras and moving all over the place. You can't run, you can't move. If you do that, it could turn into a different situation. But if the animal comes out and he approaches you, and I listen to my guide, I'm always having, if I have work with the guides. So the guide is the one telling me what to do. Stay calm, don't move. Okay, when he looks away, or when he puts his head under the water, or when he's eating salmon and he's not interested, or he's consumed in something else, then you can move. Not move a lot, but you can actually move your camera. So you have to manage the situation, listen to your guide more importantly, and be very respectful to the animals in order for them to be respectful to you. Sometimes I wouldn't choose to go to a bear and be 5 feet away on land or anywhere else. I think I'm more afraid of walking my dog at my lake, down the road and a bear coming out with her cubs. That's a scary situation for me. I don't think that's that can happen anytime. Yeah, it's managing the situation and making sure that you're never approaching an animal to change their behavior, to make them uncomfortable, or to cause harm, to you or whatever it is. So, and that's really important for wildlife photography. It's the ethics that go along with it that are so incredibly important, that everybody needs to be respectful and take care so nothing happens to you and it doesn't change the behavior for the animal.
There's an amazing catharsis in this, isn't there? Just being able to balance and settle and be a part of it.
Exactly. And just be, right? Be, and not be running around and, chasing after whatever that you have to in life, or go to the grocery store or whatever. I mean, it's my meditation, I guess. It's where I find my peace, and I try for it. It's been a couple of weeks since I've been out shooting, and I've been doing other things, and I can't wait to just be with the animals and just look at icebergs and just allow whatever is going to happen.
And my thanks to Michelle Valberg. That's part 1. Part 2 of our conversation is coming up shortly. The rain, actually, and the amount of rain we've had recently, one of the legacies of that is all these beautiful, very, very vibrant greens of the mosses and the lichens. I feel a touch of rain beginning to fall, by the way. On my back, on the back of my neck at least. I'm using my X100V today. I'll be taking this camera and another one to the Gambia. Let me get a picture of this. Sort of an S-shaped. I suppose this looks like this is the roots of a tree that's quite far off. That's something I want to learn a lot more about this year, is the magic of the trees as they talk to each other under the surface. Right, here we go. F4, 1/2/5, 640 ISO. The vibe was not so much understory, actually. The vibrant nature of the paths along what I'm walking today for my photo walk. Another sketchbook image. I'll mention this a few times because I really want to start the letters flowing for the new year. We've got some, of course, from last year as well, which I will go to and read for you. But I'd love to hear from you. stories@photowalk.show is the email address for you to send your letters to. stories@photowalk.show. If you are sending pictures, 2,500 pixels, please, if you can resize them. I didn't mention last time because I know not everybody knows how to resize and make those images smaller for printing on the web page. So if you can't do that, don't worry, send me your full resolution ones and I'll do the heavy lifting for 2024 and optimize them for you. In a couple of weeks' time, I'm off to the Gambia with some wonderful fellow photo walkers and explorers. I just can't wait. What an adventure to start the year. I'm very lucky. I do appreciate that. I'll come more to that in a while, actually. I've talked a lot about the trip, which is from the 23rd/24th of Jan, depending upon which day you jet in, to the 2nd of Feb. Now, I think we probably have our full lineup of those coming now, but somebody did say to me only a day or so ago that life had thrown such a wobble at them in 2023 that they were of the mind just to book a flight and be out there for 10 days of adventures in a wonderful, small and very friendly West African nation. We are travelling up the River Gambia to discover nature and history, some of the darker parts of the history, actually. It'll be fascinating as well as illuminating for all kinds of reasons. Also, we're sampling the foods, making documentary pictures about the people of this country. We're going to villages, even schools, to help make doco pictures that they're going to use. And we're under the supervision of award-winning photographer Jason Florio for part of our adventure. I'll be guiding too, as will my good friend and film producer Andy Thompson, who lives in the Gambia with his wife and beautiful children. So it's still open for a few days yet, if you'd like to come. And if it's one of those moments where you think, I almost used the dang word again, dang. See, I'm practicing for my American South adventure. Neil, we do say a lot more than that in America land. I know you do. Sorry. So, yeah, if you're thinking, do you know what? Yes. I'm going to make this adventure the adventure that sets up the year, then there's still time. Contact me through the page, which is on the website, and we'll talk together and make all the arrangements that you need. We'll be recording a show while we're out there. You and I, yes, we will. I'll not be airing it, though, while I'm in the Gambia. In the past, I've done that. I'm not going to do that anymore when we go on our adventures and our retreats. The reason is I really want to get very immersed in the experience. I'm immersed in the experience anyway while I'm there. But recording it is one thing. That's fantastic. And of course, you need to do that while you're there. But actually trying to produce the show while you're out there as well, I'm going to be doing those when I return from these adventures and these retreats that we have now. And talking of that, the other news that I have is that because Scotland completely sold out for 2024, I have now opened a second week. And that's because I had a few people disappointed about not being able to come along. So a second week has been organised. Details are on the website. There's the Africa 24 details there. And there's also Scotland as well. It's Sunday. The week I've opened up is Sunday the 15th of September to Saturday the 22nd of September. 15th to 22nd. Food and all exploring and transport once you're there is included. This year we're also learning about creative writing. There's some forest bathing, which we'll be doing. And I knew it wouldn't be long before we're buzzed by our first aircraft. I don't think it'll be up there long because the rain has started. That usually means private aircraft that buzz me in this area think, oh, that's it for the day. Let's land, have a cuppa, shall we? So yes, we'll be learning about creative writing, forest bathing, and how to fall in love with sound as part of your skill set with still pictures for 2024. So some new skills to be learned on this one. We will be going into the dark room as well. That's always a very, very popular theme of our trips to Scotland. It has been for the last couple of years. So there's only 6 places. Only 6 places. If you're interested, then go to the website photowalk.show. And I've come across a fold. It's not a very big one, so one step and I'm across. No worries, as they say. So Scotland is launched. Africa is still there if you'd like to come, and we'll be making some programs helping share the experience of these wonderful visits that we make, the retreats that we make, being away with a camera with like-minded people who don't mind if you say, do you mind if I just take another, I just need to get the tripod here, and yeah, no worries at all, you do it. Those sort of people. I'm very much looking forward to it. As the rain starts to fall, the leaves really come to life along the path where I'm walking. That plane, by the way, I talked about a moment ago, it's not gone. Land, go on, it's a blue sky. There's some low clouds coming in as well. Go on, be on your way. Give me and my other listeners some space and some peace. Can't even see it through the cloud here. Go on. But I might have to let the rains fall a bit longer before I get that really lovely, lush leaf photography with just spotlets of rain. Oh, hang on, I've got caught up with some brambles there. It's the Photowalk show. Assignment coming soon, and assignments with a twist this year, as you will find out shortly. This is a super next letter from Martin Eaglestone. My first ebook was introduced prior to Crimballs, called Why a Photographic Sketchbook. We've laid a little reference to it already, though I was thrilled to receive this response to it. You'll be familiar with the why question that I so often ask guests at the end of the interviews, and a spoiler alert, there'll be one today, although a very short answer today, very succinct, pithy answer to it. Anyway, the book leads with a personal account of a particular day in 2009. My personal account, that is, that has, upon reflection, helped me really recognise the facets of my own life that have led toward this creative leaning. It wasn't the thing that made me a creative. No, that came many, many, many years previous to that. But the answers to why explore within the opening chapter lead towards this serendipitous discovery of sketchbooking with a camera. My desire to photographically record and share the everyday, be that Vista-style beauty, because sometimes they're slightly more Vista-led, but often just human curiosity. And I have a bit of an apology to make, actually, in that sketchbooking isn't it's something that was mentioned by a previous guest, and I will link to her on the show page today, because sketchbooking, that wasn't, I used to call them my somethings and nothings, didn't I? So it's not exactly an original. Sketchbooking with a camera isn't exactly an original concept of mine. It's a borrowed concept. The wondrous mundanity that we see sometimes, just capturing that and photographing it. But, you know, much like Andy or Andre's letter earlier when he was talking about capturing pictures of the local abandoned supermarket that brings back memories for him. Those sort of things. That's what sketchbooking with a camera is all about. I wish I'd sketchbooked with my Instamatic many years ago when I was but a youth. Now, at the end of the book, there's an invite to answer some questions about your own creativity, a sort of workbook in some respects, if you will. And this prompted Martin to write in. Now, I'm not going to go over every single question that you gave me an answer about. I'll keep some of them, but I was thrilled you took the time. And if we get more of these, I think I'll read some of them out on the show because I reckon they're quite inspirational, very inspirational, many levels. Hi, Neil, says Martin Eagleston. I just read your book. I found it an emotional read at the start, an interesting choice of images as well. And given that you invited comment, here are mine. Why do you make pictures? Well, it's a satisfying escape to a more natural world away from the everyday pressures. How do you feel when you make your pictures and your photographs? Well, there's a focus and an inner warmth, says Martin, as the shutter clicks, often in anticipation of exploring the result in the edit on my return home. Does one or more life events influence the way you see or you photograph or experience the world? Well, I've come to realise that the woodlands, the riversides, the natural places may reflect a joy I felt as a child in northwest Wales. Living on the edge of the Snowdonia National Park, fishing in the local rivers and playing in the open air. That was one of my favourite visits last year. One of my favourite... was that my tummy then? Am I hungry? I think I am. One of my favourite visits of last year. Climbing in Snowdonia up the... some people rudely call them just large hills, Neil. I look at them all, even the lower ones, as mountains. What is stillness and how does that affect your creativity? Well, I often sit with a flask of coffee in a woodland or a landscape and I breathe in the moment, says Martin, the view and the sounds. What pictures, photographers and creative experiences have influenced you? Being relatively new to a more intense period of photography, says Martin, I think a lot of people have found themselves that way, particularly as I like the word mature, as you know. As we mature, we think, photography, that great way of slowing down, appreciating, breathing in, as Martin has called it, the landscape. I find the inclusive and enthusiastic approach of Mally Davis inspiring, says Martin. But as a more recent enthusiast, I enjoy a number of YouTube films and generations. Indeed, I absorb many of them like a sponge, as I do as well. And Mally is, as you know, he's become a feature of this show. Much like something you place on the mantelpiece. Yes, I know. And he's here at the end of the month with some of his jibber-jabbering as one of the new features. So thank you, Martin. He says, total amateur but enthusiastic, trying to vlog on YouTube at Wednesday Through the Lens. I will link to your YouTube channel. I had a look. I love the road in the top images of your 2023 pictures video. It's in Merthyr. And when I looked at it, I thought, I can't be Merthyr or on the edge of Merthyr. That's got to be one of those long roads that sort of leads off into the distance. It was very, very American as it led off into the distance. Perhaps Australia, maybe not the right kind of vegetation on each side, but certainly I see that as one of those long American roads. There's sort of slight wiggle in them, but otherwise straight on, undulating. The only thing that gave it away was a very British car. But thank you for your letter. The book is on the website, and thank you for fleshing out. Oh, that doesn't sound so nice, does it? Your love of photography, but you know what I mean. Thanks, Martin. There's a nice bit of woodland to my left. If I can get into there, I'm sure I'll find some wonderful vegetation which is getting rain-soaked now to photograph. I like those. So there's a peace, there's a serenity to water in photographs. Definitely. Just need to get to it without sort of ripping myself to shreds through the brambles that seem to be along this path now. The assignment for this month. First up, we should have a winner for last month. Bird photographer Dwayne Patton asked us to photograph a bird from ground level at dawn, and we had some amazing pictures, incredible, beautiful pictures. So it was tricky, though. I've gone with some cracking pictures from Eric Joseph, who stuck very well to the words, the challenge that was set by Dwayne. Neil, I stayed as true to the assignment, says Eric, as possible. Up at 3:45 a.m. to drive a few hours to the coast, though where I live, New Jersey, most wetlands, in the United States of course, most wetlands are part of sanctuaries or parks that don't open until at least sunrise and many several hours after. The Forsyth Wildlife Refuge opened up right at sunrise though, which was about 10 minutes before my arrival. I scurried about a quarter mile to the wetlands as quickly as possible and found quite a few waterfowl. Had about 20 minutes of the golden hour left, and I managed a few photos, of which I will put on the show, well, I say put on the show page, of which are on the assignments page. That's what I meant to say. Overall, it was a great morning out on the marshes. Top left, shoveler, as you look at the page. Then we have a dunlin, lower left, northern pintail, lower right, great blue heron. And you can see more of Eric's work. I'll have a link to his X feed, Twitter feed. And the show flask will be making its way to you to warm you during more of your 3:45s. Right, this month, the assignment, it's little old me setting the assignment. And we do have a sort of theme to all this year's assignments. It's sort of self-imposed, so it's not a permanent rule. But I sort of said to myself I would set one assignment per year. I think I may have done two actually in 2022, but it was interesting. I looked back at 23 to see which one I'd set, and I hadn't. That's how smart the years seem to have flown by. So I'm going to play my card early with this one, and I'm going to set one for 2024, and I'm also setting up the theme, which is going to be this year in 2024. All the assignments will be a one-word assignment. So even though we'll obviously give more detail, those that set the assignments, to what we'd like you to think about or do, it's essentially a one-word assignment, which I think is great for creativity because it can be very, 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 very open to interpretation, a word, can't it? Now, this Photowalk podcast often talks of hope, or we do here, I do, and belief and achievement against adversity, and your letters certainly talk of that. It's a running unspoken theme of many conversations with studio guests too. So I'm asking you this month to make a photograph that speaks of resilience. I think the word as a photograph can say many, many things. The great outdoors and extreme temperatures would be one, wouldn't it? A loved one. I don't know why I thought of this, but it came to mind. A loved one, or anybody actually, crossing the finishing line. First time they've run a half marathon or a marathon, something like that. So it could be a picture that depicts or suggests psychological resilience. It could be something that poses a challenge that nature or the human spirit or determination to overcome, thrive. It's, as I say, it's very open to interpretation, the word resilience in a photograph. I popped up an example of my own on the assignments page, the one for January, which shows something that I wasn't expecting to photograph, actually. It's a picture I made Wednesday, just a couple of days ago. So good luck. And the assignments page on photowalk.show will have details of how and where to send your pictures and stories to. And if you'd like to write a couple of words, then you'll have the opportunity to do so as well as I have. I think I did more than a couple of words. You know me. So Are you ready for the second part of my conversation today? An absolute delight to talk with the photographer Michelle Valberg, for whom, particularly when she's in the Arctic, I think Michelle probably needs to fight a fair amount of resilience herself, let alone what the animals have to do and find to live in some of those challenging conditions she photographs. So here's part 2 of my conversation today with Michelle Valberg. I can't talk about bears without mentioning a particular photograph, the championed picture on the front of your website. Actually, you know, as soon as you put in, if you pop your name into Google, this picture comes up associated with you. So often it does. The beautiful picture of a bear shaking the water from its fur, which I'll link to on the show page today. Now, first up, I know now it isn't. At first glance, I automatically thought, what a lovely picture of a polar bear, which I would imagine a lot of people think. But it's not. It's an entirely different bear. This is Boss the spirit bear. I don't want to say any more because I'd like you to tell us what this spirit bear is and why it's white.
Why it's white. Have you ever heard of a spirit bear before?
No, I'm adding this to the long list of animals that you have introduced me to today.
Black squirrel, spirit bear. I mean, whatever. So out in British Columbia in the Great Bear Rainforest, there is a bear known as the Coyote bear, or commonly known as the spirit bear. And it is a black bear with a recessive gene. So it is not an albino. It is a bear with a recessive gene. So actually the indigenous legend is the raven made every 10 black bears a white bear to remind the world of the Ice Age. Yeah. So that's the story, the legend behind it. But they don't really even know how many spirit bears that there are. But there's a particular place that you can go. And if you have the time, like, an entire day or 10, you can sit on this river. And if you're lucky enough, you get to see the spirit bear come down and you feast on salmon. There's black bears on the river. This is where I took the photo of Boss. And I had been sitting very low to the ground. My knees were almost in the water. And I was on a tripod and we were watching him from a fair distance. And Boss started to walk towards us. And this is when my guide was like, just stay cool, stay calm. He's just coming. He's just walking towards us. He just kept coming and coming and coming. And then he would put his head under the water. And I looked at Chris and I said, I don't get, what is he doing? Because he just was looking under the water. I was just, what's he doing? He said, he's feeding off a salmon roe at the bottom of the river. It's like, that is so incredible. At this point, he came and stood right in front of me.
How far away?
15 feet. I don't know. He was really close.
Yeah, I'd say.
He put his head under the water and then he looked up at me. And, the water is all dripping and I got the shots. But I was so in awe of what he was doing. I have a dog that goes swimming. I say this all the time. My dog loves to swim. It's an old English sheepdog. She goes in the water. She comes out. What do dogs do? When they come out of the water?
They shake.
They shake.
Yeah.
You think I kind of would have maybe thought that or anticipated it, but I was so in awe of what was happening. I was just, this is crazy. And then he shook. And I had all the wrong settings, I had too long of a lens. And I was just like, well, that's just, I didn't really know what I got, but I knew that I was too close. And I actually got a really, really cool shot, but it's a tight shot. But he was blanketed against this dark forest. So when he was shaking, all the water was kind of illuminating around him.
I know, yeah.
So I took out my 70-200. I had the 500 on at that point. Took my other camera with a 70-2, and fortunately for me, he did it a number of times.
Wow.
So he didn't just do it once; he did it a couple of times. So it allowed me a lot of opportunities with as fast of a frame rate as I could get, because it was all about positioning, right? When they shake like that. And I think one of the most powerful things about that image is because I was low to the ground, I was at his level. And he was staring right at me. His positioning to me was so direct. And it was, then I had to choose that image that was, the ears were right, the eyes were right, the water wasn't going in front of his eyes, everything, how the water sprayed, how it was illuminated on the background. So there were so many different elements, because sometimes he shook and he just did a closer, a shorter shake. So it wasn't dynamic. But this was when he went down and he was, fishing for the salmon roe for quite some time. So when he came up, he had a huge shake, and it ended up being the best of all.
It's a wonderful picture. It's almost like he was working with you. Did he come across and sign a release form? Have you got it? Have you got it now, Michelle? Do I need to shake a bit more?
Seriously, girl, have you got it now? Have I done it enough for you?
It was absolutely. I mean, it's received so much praise and prize, hasn't it? It's done well.
I won the World Photographic Cup with it. And what was interesting about that too, a lot of people came out to me. I went to Rome for the World Photographic Cup, and they would say, "Oh, you're the photographer that has the polar bear." So because in the World Photographic Cup, you don't have a title, you don't have a description. So they're looking at that image. And I was saying that to somebody the other day, that I'm in this year as part of the Canada team, and I have a photo of a coastal wolf, which is also extremely rare. Have you ever heard of a coastal wolf?
Oh, no, here we go. No. I need to come on one of your tours, clearly. I thought I'd watched every Attenborough show I ever could.
Yeah. So, same thing though. The photo is of a coastal wolf. It's a close up this time. And, there's no, I want to scream that it's a coastal wolf. It's so rare and elusive, and it's not just a wolf, and it's not a German shepherd. No. It's a wolf. It's a coastal wolf. It's a sea wolf.
How important are the accolades and the awards?
I'm always in awe when something does happen. I'm never expecting of it. I never do. I'm always in awe. And I think it's a recognition that is important for your career. But I put myself out there for it too. It's not like they just come and find me. I'm asked to submit, or I'm constantly putting myself out there. I guess I'm looking for recognition in that way, if I'm honestly saying, like, I'm submitting to contests, but it's also a challenge to myself. And it's a challenge of becoming a better photographer, or, continuously learning and what is speaking to people, what works, what makes an image so much better. Or when you're taking 20 frames a second, how do you choose that one image that is so different than the others, that is going to have the impact? And will frame one be different than frame 17 or 19? More importantly, if I can make somebody happy, or smile, or feel that they want to know more about an animal, or teach them something, or make them concerned about a species, make them concerned about our environment. I'm not a conservationist. I don't call myself that, but I have an ability to storytell with my images. And if I have an audience, and the more accolades, or the more, if I have a spirit bear on the front cover of Canadian Geographic, I'm not only honored, but I also know that that's spreading the word, because, Canadian Geographic is obviously a Canadian magazine, but I have a reach around the world. So you're like, oh, I've never heard of a spirit bear before, or what Boss has done, for the world knowing about the spirit bear. And if they know about the spirit bear, then they might want to know about the Great Bear Rainforest. And then if they know about the Great Bear Rainforest, they might say, well, we need to protect this space.
Well, you're absolutely right, because when I was looking at your work earlier at lunch with the kids and my wife, I said, look at this bear. And they did say, polar bear. I said, no. And at that moment, I was able to say, this. But you're right. That's exactly what this sort of thing does. And I'm pleased you mentioned the environment, because you, in this privileged position that you find yourself in, where you're going around the world to these amazing places, and that includes Africa, you are seeing firsthand how the world is changing. And across the last 38 years, I know not all of that time has been spent going to the Antarctic and Arctic, but in the last decades that you've been doing this, you've seen the change. And I wonder how you feel about that, and how you feel your photographs can be a force for good in making people understand that this change is happening.
Yeah, and I think more importantly, it's the story that goes along with it, or when I went up to the Northwest Passage this year, we went from Greenland all the way through the passage and all around Northwest Territories, Yukon, and we ended in Alaska. We went through the entire Northwest Passage and did not see any ice. And when we got around to the Bering Sea in Alaska, our captain actually took us to find a large breakaway of ice that had a polar bear on it and walrus. But we spent 3 weeks not seeing any ice. We saw icebergs, but we didn't see any ice. So it was really scary. I've done the Northwest Passage a number of times. I've been going since 2007, I guess, was my first time. And I'll tell you, it's unbelievable. We couldn't get through the passage a number of times because there was so much ice. And we got stuck once. We had to be taken out or helped out with the icebreaker. So to go through the passage and not see any, and it was then a lack of the animals that we saw too. So you're traversing through the Northwest Passage. It doesn't mean that you're going to see any more animals, I guess, if there is ice or not. But, just to see that lack of ice, it's really actually very, very scary. Just to see the salmon runs change. I went, you mentioned the ice grizzly, another species it's a grizzly bear. It's just because it's eating on a late salmon run, and the colder temperatures mean that the water's freezing on its fur. But I talked to the owner of the company that I went with, and I said, I'd love to come back. And he said, well, I guess you didn't hear about the dam. And, that whole operation is shut down now because there are no more salmons. The bears aren't coming to that particular area. So we're encroaching on these territories and causing, these animals to move or not have the resources that they once had. And gosh, it's just scary to see the changes and, the impact that we are having on the natural world.
I always ask, I think, when I ever speak to environmental photographers, and though you might not necessarily call yourself that as a title, you are out there and seeing it and you're part of it. I ask, is there hope? And I wonder whether that's even a question I need to ask you, because it sounds from your reaction that you feel there's a sense of hopelessness, unless you do feel hope.
No, I do hope. I do. I absolutely do hope. But I think that as visual storytellers, it's really important for us to not only photograph it, but tell the story and say, listen, this is what happened. Or, when you're in the position that you're seeing something that nobody else is seeing or very few people are seeing, and you have the power with photography, with social, with your voice, with your imagery, it can make a huge difference. And I think the more and more people, that's what just keeps me driving too. It's just to show it. And there's so much I don't know. There's so much I want to learn. Many species I haven't photographed. Even my sister came from Toronto and she goes, oh, there's a Western tanager, just, a rare bird sighting. She's a birder. And it was like 5 minutes from my house. Huh? So now I'm going to, she's a twitcher. Have you heard of twitching?
I have, yeah. I know twitching. Yeah. My mum and dad were birders. I spent a lot of my childhood in hides being told to hush most of the time.
And that's before you could game or get lost on your phone.
Yes, completely. There was none of that going on. There was look straight ahead and have the binoculars if you're really lucky. So I do know what you mean. I do know what a twitcher is. Yeah.
Well, I guess I heard it so eloquently when my sister ran into a gentleman from Toronto. They had driven up 4 hours with his family. His son and his daughter and his wife were there, and she started talking to them because she's from Toronto, and she's like, "Okay, well, let's go twitch together sometime." And she was saying it right in front of his wife. So I was like, "Well, that's pretty bold of you, Kim, to ask a man to go twitch when his wife is standing right there."
Well, talking of birds, then the Caspian tern. Now, this is one I did know of. I did know of this one. I saw your picture. It was gliding along the water, catching a fish. Are you at a stage now? And although I think you may have already answered this one, where you can second guess what's happening.
I think, when you have time, because that was taken at my cottage. So I've been watching the Caspian tern wasn't there last year, but it was the year before. So when he started to change his behavior, different than, we didn't know it was a Caspian tern at first because we were sitting on the dock and there were other, gulls all around. So, it was just thinking it was another gull. When he started to dive, then my husband went, okay, that's not a gull. So I got my long lens out and I was like, oh, that's a tern. But I also thought it was a common tern. I didn't think it was a Caspian. So I found out it was Caspian. So then it became my mission to find this Caspian tern. So when you have the ability to go back and back and back, I think that, you can read about behavior, you can try to understand it, you can watch videos, you can watch David Attenborough, you can do all this stuff, but whatever, it's not necessarily going to happen for you. There's no guarantee for anything. But when I started to see that it was diving and then gliding across the water, I just kept on it. Like I just kept shooting. And at that point, I didn't even know what he was doing. It was like he was filleting the fish after he caught it.
It was amazing.
So he came out of the water and he's just like slapping it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is he killing the fish or what? Because then he ate it right in midair too. He, flipped it up and then grabbed it with his mouth. But I also was just continuously shooting because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was happening until I saw the back of my camera. Like I was so, just you can anticipate, but you can watch, but you can also until that action is over, don't give up.
I'll link to this collection that has that picture in it. I mean, you live in the most amazing playground for photographing wildlife, don't you? When I look at the bears and the moose too, there's nature just waiting to pounce, isn't there? Sometimes.
But you have to get out of bed for it.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's not easy to do. We go out for a boat ride or we go for a canoe ride or whatever in the middle of the day. We see loons, but they're usually, in the far, like closer to the islands, or they're not interested, or they'll, dive under the water and swim away. But getting out of bed at 4:30 in the morning consistently as soon as the spring hits and I can, it's a long season.
Yeah.
I don't mind getting up early in the morning, but 4:30 is not particularly easy to do when you're nice and cuddly and everything else, and you're looking outside going, should I? And I've never regretted ever going out in my kayak. And when I'm out there, it's just me and the animals. Nobody else is on the lake. Shh, don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone to come out with me because I don't want anyone else out there with me. And there's no interruption. There's no, it's just me and the animals. And then I know my lake so well. Like I can see like when things aren't right or things are changed or there's an animal or there's behavior. I'm sure there's things that I miss, but I also am in tune to what the raccoons sound like, to what the otters sound like, the loons sound like, and now I've developed such a wonderful relationship with my loons. They'll come and search me out.
Oh,
and I've had two friends see that this summer. I'm like, I don't know where the loons are, but they'll find me. And they did. They just all of a sudden pop out and they're like, oh, hi. Yeah, I mean, so that's where you get the opportunity. It's when I go out in the middle of the day, it doesn't happen. When I come back and then I sit on my dock, and that's when I photograph that Caspian tern from my dock.
Let's talk about some other sides of your work. Project North. It's a not-for-profit that you co-founded. Tell us about Project North and the philanthropic side of your life.
Yeah, it's always been very, very important for me to give back. It was instilled in me from my parents, and I realized as a visual storyteller that we have a lot to offer. So it's always been a part of my path, and it's been parallel, and it was a great way to give back in my community and also get myself known in my community from when I was doing weddings and portraits, and it was an opportunity to help the hospitals and that sort of thing. So I gained a lot of momentum with my career just by, and you never give to receive, you give because you want to, but it was a great way to become part of my community, a bigger part of my community. So then when I was moving into the wildlife world, I went up to the Arctic for the first time, and I went up to Pond Inlet, which is on the northeastern side of Baffin Island. So it's at the top of the world, and a small community of about 1,000 people, and they have a huge love of hockey. And you could see it because people were out and kids were playing in the street and playing with crappy, ratty old equipment. And they had, hockey jerseys in their window. And you could tell the huge love. I mean, Canadians are are typically hockey lovers anyway. And I was inspired years ago hearing of another photographer, a woman photographer that did a lot of work with the military, but went up with the Maple Leafs and brought up hockey equipment. So I was traveling with a company called Adventure Canada. I called them and I said, hey, can I bring up some hockey equipment for the kids since we're going up? And you charter the plane and we're on the ship and we're going to these communities. And they said yes. And it was just, it's been nonstop ever since. And because they said yes, I did a community drive and got everybody involved, from hockey players to, community leaders, the mayor and the famous Rabbi Bulka here and all kinds of individuals that could help spread the word. And we had so much come in and so many people donated their used equipment that we had the problem of having too much. And then it just snowballed from there. I could speak about this for another hour, so I'm trying to shorten it up. But because I included some friends of mine that believed in what I was doing and have some amazing sponsors like Scotiabank and Canadian North and companies like Adventure Canada and Diamond Storage who held all our equipment because all those people said yes to helping. We've now brought up $2 million worth of hockey gear to over 40 Inuit communities across, and Indigenous communities, not just Inuit communities. And it continues, and it's all not for profit. There's no paid employees. It's all driven. We brought up the Stanley Cup. We've brought up hockey players, legends. We've given opportunity for these kids to play, engage the families as a whole as well. And yeah, it's been remarkable. So it has nothing to do with photography.
Your work with Linda Morin as well is shown on your website. And I went to have a little bit more of a look at what Linda's story was. She became the first woman in the world to go topless on the front cover of a book after a double mastectomy. And you made that picture. To tell me about that project, because at first I think there was a real pushback from people on whether that could or could not be a book cover. Fortunately, their voices did not win because it became the book cover, which is the point of it, isn't it, really? And that's the story.
Talk about a remarkable human, right? She's willing to do that. And she would go to doctors, go to hospitals, and she would just take off her top and stand there. And she just became a voice for women who have had mastectomies. And then she started a store, and she called it Look Beyond, and it's a store for women who have had mastectomies and for lingerie. And how fortunate for me to be able to share her story through my imagery. It's all about her, but I was just lucky enough to be able to take that photo and for her to be brave enough to stand in front of me and bear, something that nobody else was really, really willing to do at that time, or willing but never accepted. I shouldn't say there was no one willing, because I'm sure there's a lot of women out there that would have stood up there, but because she had the right people in her corner to make it happen as well.
It's an incredibly potent picture. Your photographs have appeared on the Canadian postage stamps as well. I've always thought of that as one of the ultimate accolades, Michelle. Probably since a television program we had for kids in the UK here. You may never have heard of it. It's called Blue Peter. And they used to run an annual competition for things like designing the Christmas Royal Mail stamp or something. The amount of times I entered, and I've never really gotten over the fact that I didn't get anywhere near being a prize winner. What did it feel like, though, to have your pictures blessing the postage stamps of Canada? Because I know you're an ambassador for Canada and everything about Canada. It must have been a real privilege to see your photographs taking post around the world.
Yeah, I know. It was the best when people would send me notes, just to send me a note and have their bear stamp on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolute honor. And I have an image on a coin as well, a Royal Canadian Mint coin. Yeah, again, it's putting yourself out there. And the designer actually reached out to me, and it was painful because I knew about this for about 2 years and couldn't tell anybody.
Oh,
and I had to sign the NDAs, and he said, I'm designing stamps. And I was like, for what? stamps. Like, what? For Canada Post? I'm like, what? Yeah. So it took a little bit of time, but I worked with a designer, and then it was interesting as a photographer because he had, very consistent, very particular images of each kind of bear that I had to find through my image bank. And I had to go through years and years and thousands of images to find that one particular shot that was going to work within this stamp and the right look, a bear facing on. And I was actually quite stunned to see how many images that actually fit that bill, that actually a bear was looking at me.
The Order of Canada, things like your ambassadorial association with Nikon. When you get up in the morning, are you still pinching yourself?
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, when you were introducing me, like I said, he is talking about me. I feel so honored and blessed, and it doesn't come without hard work and dedication and passion and living and breathing photography, but it comes with the support of so many people in my life, like my husband and my kid, my parents, my sisters, my friends, my colleagues, the people that believe in me too. So it doesn't happen alone, and I could never do any of this without their support. When you say those things, I'm like, yeah, it's been an amazing ride. There is a question that I ask at the end of most of my interviews, and this is definitely one where I will ask this question, although you've kind of answered it at various stages of our conversation. What's your why? Oh, I've never been asked that before. To make a difference. Yeah. We're blessed as photographers. We do have a wonderful message for the world. And it doesn't keep saying it. It doesn't have to be because you travel the far ends of the world, but it's in your own backyard. I didn't know that you didn't have red squirrels. And when I said a black squirrel, this conversation came up a while ago. And it was somebody said from the UK to my friend, wait, you have black squirrels? What's that? Yeah. So I knew that whole story. So I set you up for that. And my sincere thanks to Michelle Valberg for talking to us this week on the podcast. And I did hint nearer the start, didn't I, that you could ask a question to Michelle yourself. As you know, and as was discussed right at the start, she'll be in the Antarctic at this moment, making pictures and having an adventure. And I thought it might be nice to open up the opportunity for you to ask some questions upon her return, because I intend to talk again to Michelle about the adventures she had in the Antarctic. So, if you write them to stories@photowalk.show, maybe you'll have some questions following looking at more of her work on the website. Perhaps there's some questions that come out of this podcast itself and the interview that you've heard today. Stories@photowalk.show. She'll also be on just a little bit more on the Extra Mile show, which is now ready to download. Michelle will be talking about breastfeeding squirrels and charging walruses. Two facets of wildlife you possibly didn't think you'd hear in the same sentence. But there we go. So Michelle returns to the Extra Mile. What, Neil, is the Extra Mile? I'll tell you. We do have quite a few new listeners joining us, so you might not be sure or aware of what the Extra Mile is. It's our Patreon channel, which is where for a few dollars, a few pounds, a few euros a month, you can help support the show and keep us here, trying to build the community for 2024 and beyond. And we have a show each week. An extra mile is walked, although actually it's more than an extra mile. Usually it's about 2, possibly sometimes 3. And Michelle recorded a few extra words for the Extra Mile show. And then I've got some other thoughts as I walk. There's some letters, some comments from previous Extra Mile shows. We talk a little bit more about books. And I talk about shouting at the actor Terence Stamp, which is a bit left field. You'll have to hear the show to understand what that was all about. So, our PS to the show is to come.
But before that, we need to play a play-out song. And the play-out song is a song that just gives you an opportunity to walk a little bit more with your thoughts, make some more pictures. So as you walk with the thoughts that you may have gathered from today's programme, I play a piece of music, and we're going to extend that to a slightly broader range of music. Well, I think pretty broad anyway. And it's a feature that's going to stay in 2024. It was in the survey, and I'll come to the survey over the next couple of weeks. It was in the survey where I asked you to give us thoughts and feedback about the show in 2023 and before. And the play-out song is something that we've been doing for quite a while now. And it seems that it's something that you would like to remain. So, that it will. And I'm going to choose a favourite artist of mine, actually, Hans Johnson, to end today's show. And I'm going to link to this piece of music as a video on the show page as well, because I'd like you to also experience this song visually. There is a beautiful video which has given me many thoughts for the Photowalk channel that will come in 2024. I know I've been promising it for a couple of months now, the YouTube material that I'd like to make. Hans will be very much the theme to our African adventure shows this year, and in some respects this particular piece of music works well in terms of mood, as I think about our adventure to come later on this month, because as I learned at the end of last year through the loss of some friends, actually, as much as anything, that their enduring message was one of adventure. And my guest today has been, talking about adventure. It's at the very core of her experience and her existence. So anyway, this song brings together a real pastiche of sound design, as you'll hear. And it's the sort of thing that I'm hoping to do in Africa with our pictures and sounds and music. This piece is called Great Sea, which is the English translation of the Anishinaabe name, Gichigume, the true name of Lake Superior in North America. This is Hans Johnson with Adam Siploa on cello. Hans Johnson's Great Sea. Do go and look at the video, the film on the show page today, because it's a beautiful film. It really is. And the experience of seeing the music, if that's possible. Can you see the music? Yeah. You're getting a bit poetic, Neil. Move on. Should we make a final sketchbook image? Yeah. I'm looking up thinking, is there anything... Here I could, but the sky is just featureless, it really is. But this, put my letters down. Now I've got the branch of, I think it's an oak, coming across the path here. And if I look through through these wonderful, expressive branches, these arms of this tree, through it there's a tree behind it, which is a tangled, weaved mass of branches doing all kinds of excitable things. Let me see if I can get an image of that, if I can show that. The rain's beginning to fall a bit heavier now. All right, shutter speed 1/2/5. It's going to be like, well, unless I overexpose, otherwise it's going to look a little bit like a very dramatic silhouette. F4. Oh, the battery's just died. Not at the end of the show. Come on, fortunately, haha, another battery. Let's pop this one out. There we go. It's quite cold. I think the battery, it looked like there was more power in it. I've been taking a few photographs. I thought that it might last, but clearly not. Let's drop that battery back in the bag pouch. Put a new one in. Should we go for take 2 on that? Yeah, let's do that. Step back a bit as well, actually. F4, 1/25 shutter speed. And cradled by the branch in front of me is a photograph. There's a final sketchbook for the day. Just a few closing thoughts before the postscript, the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. My promise to you, and I made this in 2023 and it extends through 24, is to keep building this community of kindness, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we love, this thing we do, photographing and walking and hiking. Now on the show page there are some very handy buttons to help you share the show. They're underneath the player. But also be sure to press that follow or subscribe button on your podcast player app, please. And if you know somebody out there who might like to walk with us, you think, do you know what? I think this podcast would suit them. It's a gentle walk through the countryside of, well, it's the UK now, it'll be Africa in a few weeks' time, and America later on this year. Oh yes, I'll be recording an episode in America, well, possibly 2, without a doubt. If you know somebody who might like to walk with us, just let them know. Send them an email, tell them about the show, maybe copy the show page and see what they think. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell with Emily Renier, who look after our Facebook members, write a postscript for the show. Now, today it's from somebody, I think you may have heard of them, possibly, Theodore Roosevelt, who was a grand forward thinker in some ways about the habitat, the wildlife that surrounds us. And it is, I think, important to have a PS, a quote about the wilds today, considering Michelle and everything we talked about. So this PS today is from Mr. Roosevelt. The wildlife and its habitat cannot speak, so we must, and we will.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.